I am so looking forward to this hour. As you know, the fallout from the ABC News Disney debate debacle continues to grow, and more will grow throughout the weekend. As Donald Trump announced yesterday, he will not be doing any more debates. And I think he's right in that choice. But I'll talk about it this hour, the debate that happened, the fallout with Rich Lowry, who is the editor in chief of National Review, and Andrew C. McCarthy, former federal prosecutor at the Southern District of New York, author, columnist, and of course, co contributor with Rich Lowry on the McCarthy Report podcast. Rich Lowry also hosts National Review's The Editors podcast. Both those podcasts will be mentioned in my Washington Post column on Monday as must listening to. Rich, good morning. I don't know that we have Andy yet. We're trying to find him. I think maybe the alarm clock didn't go off. How are you, Rich Lowry?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for getting up very early this morning. We keep trying various numbers for Andy, so he'll eventually join us. You heard my setup, Rich, and I'll play a little bit tape yesterday. The very best dissection of that debate that I've heard came from the Ruthless podcast. Josh Holmes has negotiated these before. I've done 5 of these debates with the big networks. They were GOP presidential primary debates, 4 with CNN, 1 with NBC. I know how they're run. I know how they're scripted. I know how the preparation goes on, 30 to 50 people, top brass. Muir and Davis don't bear all of the weight for what happened. But what I heard, I listened to the McCarthy Report. Everyone should. I have not listened to the editor's emergency podcast yet. I will today. Your assessment, I know that Trump could have done better. He ought to have prepared more, all that stuff. What was your assessment of ABC's role?
It doesn't look any better in retrospect. It's horrible, And I've been looking back over the transcript, kind of in the cold light of day, a couple days afterwards. I don't think Trump's performance is any better. I think Harris is actually worse if you read it on the page. But the moderators are just awful. One thing I didn't notice in real time towards the end, there was a bit of a fact check. It was kind of in between a fact check and a question to Harris after Trump had said, she was sent over there to negotiate prior to the Ukraine war, and look what happened. The war happened anyway. And I think it was David Muir said, so you're saying she negotiated with Putin? Madam Vice President, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? And that's not what he said. He didn't say she met with Vladimir Putin. He says that she was sent over there, which she was. She met with Zelensky right before the invasion. So again, if you're going to fact check, you shouldn't fact check at all because it's too hard to do in real time. But if you do it, you got to be correct, one, and you can't do it just for one side. And that's what they did. And I was talking to a friend who was at CNN prior to the CNN Trump-Biden debate, and a bigwig from CNN came over and was chit-chatting and said, just watch. You just watch. After this debate, CNN will not be the story. I guarantee you, CNN will not be the story. Clearly, that was a directive from above. You're just moderators. It's not about you. You're not the candidate. At the very least, no one at ABC said that to these two and may have indeed said the opposite.
Now, Rich, you have been working around the clock because you've done the Editors podcast, you've done the McCarthy Report podcast, you've been writing for National Review. You have a job, actually, to be the editor-in-chief of National Review, and you're back on the East Coast for some National Review thing. So you've been traveling all over the place. As you've talked with people, is this going to change opinions of the debate? Because the general review, as I've said to Martha McCall and Larry Kudlow on the air, upon further review, the call on the field has been reversed by me. My call on Tuesday night was, well, Trump lost the battle. Maybe he'll win the war because of the issues that he raised. Now I'm just thinking he may have won the debate because the verdict is kind of a rolling verdict. Do you think that is happening?
I think certainly among Republicans, this is the first thing they say is they talk about the moderation. And I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, and he says, Rich, we're still talking about Candy Crowley, a relatively minor intervention.
Oh,
Well,
good
I
point.
shouldn't say minor. It was a pretty big intervention in a foreign policy debate between Romney and Obama. And what else does anyone remember of that debate? I mean, this will be remembered a very long time for Republicans. It may be, Hugh, you've been involved in these negotiations and these debates. After every bad one, Republicans, we're never going back to the same mainstream model. Everyone, that's kind of the point of view everyone has at the moment. It's never stick before. Maybe it'll stick this time. I kind of doubt it, but that's That's a take among a lot of Republicans. I don't know whether that's enough to help Trump and the overall impression of who won this debate, because you also know how it works. People say he lost, and you ask people over time, and the defeat is magnified by hearing all the pundits and commentators say it. I'm not sure how much it matters. If he's still leading on the economy and the border and inflation, I'm not sure how it matters. It matters very much. But she cleared a kind of bar the other night.
She did clear a bar. The question is upon further review. In fact, let me play for you something I said to Larry Kudlow on Wednesday, cut number 19. We'll get Rich's reaction.
Your take on any of this?
Well, I want to say kudos on your riff, Larry, because the oldest cliche in news is also true. First reports are usually wrong.
Oh,
and the first reports last night are that, Trump lost, Harris won. Over the course of the day, I have been seeing three things emerge. Trump was okay. Not his best, but he did get in some haymakers. His closing statement was best. And anytime you're focusing on migration, you're winning. Kamala Harris, by contrast, was at her best, and it wasn't very good. And then third, and I think this matters a lot, it was the worst presidential debate in modern history. I do not believe even an independent or even a moderately fair Democrat will conclude other than that was an ambush. And as that settles in, as people study what Alex just referred to, the vice president did not answer one question, nor did ABC, which is owned by Disney, ask one question about China. Not one question. I was thinking of their theme parks, their merchandising. Yep. I'm thinking about the NBA. They didn't talk about China. Not one question about Iran. They did not bring up our hostage who was executed along with 5 others in Israel on the 10/7. I am so amazed at the unprofessionalism and the deeply disrespectful of America, as Katie mentioned, performance by ABC. I think by the weekend, Trump may have won this. It's a moving river of opinion that gathers force. And at this point, yeah, I wanted more. I wanted perfection. But that was the best the vice president's ever going to be. She's not very good.
Rich, you can't hurt my feelings. Am I wish casting there, or might that happen?
I'm not sure that's going to happen with the general public. Among Republicans, this is clearly, this process is ongoing and began during the debate. It was one of the top takeaways anyone had. It was just obvious to everyone where these moderators were coming from, and they weren't upholding their professional obligation to be neutral interlocutors and kind of ask the question. And unless the question wasn't answered, there needed to be a follow up to fade back into the bush like the Homer Simpson meme. But the follow-ups for Kamala obviously weren't there. The very first question, are people better off than they were 4 years ago? She didn't answer it. She didn't even come close to answering it. She didn't even try to answer it. And she got on to tariffs by calling the Trump tariffs, a tax. And immediately Trump responded to that. And unfortunately, that sort of set the pace for what the whole night was like. She was never challenged by the moderators. And Trump didn't do enough to call her out or to call out the moderators in real time. Some of the most effective debate performances, yes, in the primary contest, not in the general election, have been calling out moderators. Newt Gingrich in South Carolina, famously, against our friend Juan Williams. So I think this is something that would have helped Trump to call out in real time.
I heard you mention that, and when Andy joins us, when we find him, and he confirmed to me last night he was going to join us, but we might have his wrong number. He might not have our number. I'm going to stipulate that the former president ought to have called out the moderators the way that Newt did. I believe you brought this up in 2012. Newt called out John King, and it in fact began a new way of engaging with moderators. Did you mention that on the McCarthy report yesterday? Was that you?
I think it may have been. I may have said it. Andy may have said it. But that was an electric moment. That won South Carolina for Newt Gingrich. But Trump didn't do it.
I'm joined by Rich Lowry, and we have found Andrew C. McCarthy, but we got him by video, which is very rare. Good morning, Andy. Welcome. I gather you have no cell service. Did you have you moved to California and the fires took it out or something?
I'm in a delightful place that's for a technological Neanderthal like me. I'm having a little trouble navigating it, but we're here.
Okay, I appreciate it. I first want to stipulate, you're the lawyer. Rich has been talking with me about this debate. I'm going to stipulate Donald Trump could have done better. He could have prepared better. He ought to have warmed up. I loved your discussion on the McCarthy report yesterday about how you warm up for trials. Glenn Youngkin on my show, a former basketball player, told me that before his debates with Terry McAuliffe, he warmed up in a debate model before he went out so that, like warming up before a game. I'm going to stipulate to all of that. Andy, I'm going to give you just 2 or 3 minutes to unpack what you think the moderators were doing. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I have done 5 of these debates. They're very scripted. We did 12 rehearsals for the NBC debate in November. NBC top brass was there. There are 30 to 50 people in the room. It's scripted. Every question is vetted so you don't embarrass yourself. I ask my own questions, but they're vetted by the NBC team. With that background, what do you think ABC's plan was?
Well, I don't think there's any question that they have their thumb on the scale for Harris. I was impressed, Hugh, by that clip that you made or that Dwayne made that sort of strung along a number of the different interjections that they had throughout the evening. But I still think that when you read the transcript cold off a page rather than listen to it, where I thought there was a lot in voice inflection and body language that confirmed the indication that they were in the tank for Harris, to me, the biggest thing that they did that was helpful to Harris was kind of be training wheels for her. I think that they gave her a comfort level, which is very important to someone who is not a terrific extemporaneous speaker and who was clearly going to be nervous in front. I don't know what the latest uh, estimations are of the audience. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of over 60 million people. But when you have
It's over
someone
70
who
million now. It's over 70 million now.
okay,
Yeah.
all right, well, you have somebody who is not particularly good at this, who is in almost Super Bowl level kind of audience. She's going to be nervous, and I think they helped her get over the hump by making her comfortable that if she fell into trouble, they were going to jump in and help her. And in the meantime, uh, with Trump, they were going to give him a hard time. I wouldn't want to say they were going to give him a much harder time than they were going to give her, because I really don't think they gave her a hard time at all. They were kind of grateful to her for her answers and for being there, whereas they fact checked him in real time. So I think there's a lot there, and I say this as an old trial lawyer. Juries are always looking for body language, and the reason that appellate courts, as you know, don't reverse trial courts on matters of credibility is because the jury was there and they weren't. And top level courts recognize that there's a lot to be said for body language and the way people act and the way their demeanor and as they answer questions. I think this was all very helpful in the way of a setting for Harris to ease into and then become stronger as the night went on.
These two are among the smartest, most respected conservative influencers in America because they're fair. They're no drop dead Trumpists. They're not MAGA people. They're like me. They've been in the conservative movement forever. And Andy knows terrorism, and Rich knows television and conservatism, and has written a great book on Lincoln. He's the only guy that realizes that Lincoln kind of is more of a Whig than people. I loved Rich's book on Lincoln. I would recommend that, and Andy's book on the blind shake trial, maybe one of the most important ones ever. But here's something I said to Martha McCollum that Rich is not going to understand because he's too young, and I think maybe Andy will. Let's play cut numbers. I know, you and I are the same man. Cut number 17, Martha McCollum yesterday.
Hugh, your reaction to what the president has had to say just now?
I am not surprised, Martha, and thank you for having me on. I think he knows that he is in the process of winning the debate on Tuesday night, and I want to explain that. NFL fans are familiar with the phrase, upon further review, the officials have reversed the call on the field due to overwhelming evidence. Well, upon further review, the American public has decided that debate was rigged.
It was absolutely in the tank by ABC and Disney to hurt the former president and to help Kamala Harris. And the way I explain this to people, and it doesn't need much for Juan and I, we're of this age, but if you're under 62, it won't necessarily make sense. In 1972, the Soviets won the gold medal against the American basketball team in the Olympics. But that's only because the officials and the referees insisted that they win. Doug Collins, Jim Brewer, they can tell you the whole story, but it was rigged. And when you go back and look at the deep, deep bias that manifested itself, it was as though lawfare had become mediafare. And that Disney...
Stop right there. Rich Lowry, do you have any idea what the 1972 basketball game was about?
I do. I did not watch it, but I'm aware of this travesty of justice, Hugh. So it's a great sports analogy.
Yeah.
Andy, do you remember watching it?
Yeah,
No,
I'm not surprised that you decided
touch
to.
too young.
I'm not surprised that you decided that Trump's best defense would be Bobby Knight. There's something about that I think makes perfect sense.
Well, they replayed the ending 3 times. Then the scorers got involved, and the appeals to the IOC was denied 3-2 because the East Bloc voted against the people who said that was a screw up. It was rigged at the end, and poor Doug Collins almost got killed. I think it was that bad. Now, Rich, we've all stipulated Donald Trump should have done better, should have gone after the moderators, and he's not doing any more debate. Does it matter in the end for the election?
Could matter a little bit. You know, it's as close as a cliche goes. Anything could matter. I doubt it's decisive. You know, I think she might get a little, 1 or 2 point bump from this, and it may kind of, I would guess, kind of fades away. But Trump needs to, continue to prosecute the case against her much more aggressively than he did on that, or effectively than he did on that debate stage, and not to beat a dead horse, Hugh, about Trump's preparation. But the closing statement was clearly something he thought about, right? It was something that was at least in his head if he hadn't rehearsed or someone hadn't told him those lines. I just don't know why he didn't have 4 or 5 of those closing statement-like statements on each of the major issues. And I think he would have been in much, much better shape. I just doubt the debate is going to matter that much. I don't think he's going to win the debate in retrospect. I just don't think the debate is going to matter much. He didn't win the debates, at least according to the post-debate polling. Any of the debates in 2016. He had a catastrophic debate, first debate in 2020. Of course, wins in 2016 and comes very close in 2020.
So, Andrew McCarthy, what will it matter? We got about a minute to the break. We'll talk during the break. We have another segment after the break, so we got plenty of time. But do you think it will matter, Andy?
Yeah, I think I'm more convinced than Rich. I think is that it'll matter, and it's only because I think Kamala Harris, unlike Trump's opponent in 2020 or 2016, had a sort of a plausibility gap that I think this helps her get over. She's a different person than he's run against before in the sense that she wasn't a known quantity, and I think to be a plausible candidate, she needed to have something like the night that she had. This is more dangerous a development for him than the other debates were.
Andrew, at the end of yesterday, as you said, we're ready to get whacked by the bad guys in a 9/11 sort of way. And I could not believe, among the things I could not believe about the debate, they didn't bring up Hirsch Goldberg Paulin, executed 10 days ago, American citizen, 10/7 Lansing. Nothing about China. Not one question about China. I think that's because Disney's got theme parks there. But generally, it wasn't a serious debate, Andrew, and we're in very serious time. Would you repeat for my audience so that they go to the McCarthy report and listen to your exposition about this, how much peril we are in right now?
Well, I just think that we're in a situation, that in many ways is very much like the 3-year run up to 9/11, by which point the leadership of Al Qaeda had moved from Sudan to Afghanistan. Except in some ways we have more protection, but in some ways the threat is worse. And what I mean is that what Al Qaeda needed to project power the way that it did on 9/11, which was more of a devastating strike against the United States than even Pearl Harbor was, and that was actually a hit on the homeland, which no other foreign enemy had done in that kind of dimension ever before. What they needed was operational alliance with a home government that could not only give them safe haven, but make it possible for them to train, to recruit, to raise money, and to plot. And we are back to Taliban controlled Afghanistan. In fact, the only difference on that score between now and 9/11 is there's the possibility that if the Taliban falls, ISIS will actually be the governing regime in Afghanistan, which in some ways is even more frightening than the prospect of a continued Taliban governance in alliance with Al Qaeda. And I think while it's good that our intelligence sharing is by leaps and bounds much better than it was 23 years ago, from the domestic side all the way across to international intelligence, the border has been eviscerated. And we really don't have any control. This government has taken no control over who is in our country, including whose operatives have gotten into our country. So I think that combination of things gives me a kind of a September 10th feeling that I'm not able to shake, and that frightens me a lot.
I can't shake it either. And Rich, this brings me to the other takeaway. John Podhoretz mentioned this on the commentary pod yesterday. John doesn't care for the president's performance at all, but he's questioning himself. Did he throw the spotlight on migration enough? And the eating cats and dogs comment. I was watching the debate with a very successful LA producer and promoter who got up with about a minute to go and said, "They're eating the dogs. That's all I needed to know." And he laughed at Trump and he left. And that is sort of, a lot of people. But on the other hand, everyone is now looking at Springfield, a city of 58,000 people in the 2020 census that has had 20,000 Haitians move into it in 3.5 years. I love the Haitian people. We support missionaries who go to Haiti. I just don't think any small town in Ohio can absorb 20,000 of anybody and not be. Was Trump cunning by just hammering this? Did that actually get people to look at Springfield?
He did talk about it all the time, right? Almost every answer you got the border in. And it's not the cats and dogs thing is not what I would have mentioned about Springfield. I mean, the 3 or 4 facts that you could mention that would be more reliable. But it's gotten people talking about Springfield, right? More than they would have otherwise. And this also goes to another David Muir fact check. So he mentions the cat and dogs thing. And Muir says, well, the city manager says that's not true. But how did Muir know the city manager was right? We still can't be sure the city manager was right. So again, it's not his role to say that. We do have a call to emergency services from a local resident saying, I see 4 Haitian immigrants taking 4 geese from the pond. And this guy who's doing the call doesn't sound praised. He sounds very reliable. The thing is, Hugh, that no one cares really about geese, right? I think you can eat as many geese as you want because people consider them a pest. It's the cats and the dogs that get people's attention. But that aside, 20,000, or maybe it's 15. Some people say 15, but 15 or 20 and an underlying population of 58 is just shocking.
They're eating the dogs and the cats meme that's come up, and whether or not former President Trump, was cunning in overstating and focusing the issue on Springfield to draw attention to Springfield. Andy, what do you think? Is he tricked us again via his very unusual media technique of using a sledgehammer on a glass thimble to get everyone to look at it? What do you think, Andy?
Well, maybe he has, but I think this more goes to your observations about the unseriousness of this. As Rich and I discussed the other day, I about fell out of my chair when she said that there were no American forces currently in combat zones around the globe. I have gotten about as far as I can go in terms of how interested I am in the cats and dogs. But why isn't somebody fact checking her on that? I mean, she's been the number.
I have Senator Sullivan coming up next hour because I've got family on the Lincoln and the Houthis are shooting at it. I'm outraged.
Yeah, and you should be. But she says that she's the last person in the room on Afghanistan. She's portrayed herself as the most important national security advisor that this president has had for 4 years. I presume she gets the presidential daily brief every day. For her, under those circumstances, to look the American people in the eye and say, for the first time, our administration is the administration that doesn't have any Americans in combat zones, when we've had the Houthis, just to take that one example, have made scores of attacks in the last since October 7th, so in the last 11 months, targeting American forces and successfully striking them. You know, we've been very fortunate that the casualty number has been low, but this is a thrum that's gone on for 11 months. I found that mind-boggling that she could say that.
Now, Rich, you guys talked on this yesterday about the lawfare and how the Hunter Biden thing had to be settled. He had to plead guilty because it would have been catastrophic to have a 6 weeks trial. I know the judge, so I don't want to get too involved in talking about that case. It's my rule. And I don't want to get too involved in how NBC and CNN did the debates in which I participated because, again, confidentiality rules. But do you think they had a conversation in the room? Again, it usually is 30 to 50 people on every single debate prep session, from brass to moderators to people in the back, the producers, et cetera. Do you think they consciously decided not to fact check Kamala Harris? And do you think they just said, we're not going to do China? And somebody said, we're not getting close. We got theme parks there. Because I don't know how you don't talk about China in a presidential debate.
Yeah, clearly, you go through the questions and you come up with a bunch of them, and you throw some out and leave a lot on the cutting room floor. So they must have thought of asking about China. You would think, right? It would be bizarre if they didn't. And for whatever reason, they left that one on the floor, but decided to ask Trump about a month old controversy, something he said at a black journalist forum. It's just a totally bizarre choice. I think not asking about Hunter is a little bit more understandable, given Biden's no longer the main issue, or the opponent anymore. Is still a big issue. It should be a big issue. And view that was one of Trump's best moments, right, when he said she's Biden. He could do much worse than going and saying that 20 times a day from now until election day.
So, Andy, I don't want to talk about Hunter Biden either. I don't even want to talk about the Biden family. I heard you say for 50 years the guy's been saying stuff that serves his immediate short-term objective. So we're done with Biden. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in whether or not the moderators consciously had a plan to lift her up and protect her, be her training wheels, as you said on the McCarthy report yesterday and repeated off air. That will be in my podcast today. Do you think they planned that? I mean, I can't imagine how they would end up this bad. And after I listened to the Ruthless podcast, and Josh Holmes has negotiated debates, I've been in them. They did a line by line. If you guys listen to Ruthless, a line by line on the debate, and they're just stunned at how bad it was. Like the Richter scale is exponential, not incremental. This wasn't. Most media biases it at a 5 on the Richter scale. This was an 8 on the Richter scale. Do you think they planned it that way, Andy, or did they fall into blue bubble bias?
Well, I think blue bubble
okay.
bias there's a lot of intent behind that too. But this kind of reminds me you of during the Obama administration. I was asked all the time, do you think Obama told Holder to do that? I mean, I think we went like 4 years with that. And my answer to that was always, Holder is there precisely because Obama doesn't want to have those kinds of conversations. He is in that position because he knows what's expected of him. And if he deviates from what's expected of him, they have subtle ways of getting him back on course, including not so subtle ways, I imagine as well. But I don't think these conversations are necessary the same way that people think about conspiratorial groups that I used to prosecute eons ago, where you actually did have people have to plan out criminal escapades because that's just the nature of the beast. I think that these people are in the jobs that they're in the institutions that they're in, because they know exactly what's expected of them. And a lot of this is seamless and probably wordless. but everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and they executed it. In fact,
That's
I think if
interesting.
they had to plan it, they may not have been as grotesque as they were in terms of the extent to which they went to lean Harris's way and give Trump a hard time. That's the kind of thing, probably, if you expressly had to plan it out, someone would say, no, 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 we can't get away with that.
Well, but what I want the audience to know is how there were 12 rehearsals for the NBC debate I did with Vivek and Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie and whoever the fifth was. There were five on the Tim Scott. And every question was planned. Every question was rehearsed. My questions were all about China and all about TikTok and their Navy and their military. And they don't veto. They test and we anticipate responses and we know where we're going next. It's a script. Rich, it's like putting an issue of National Review together, right? It's planned. You just don't take everything that comes in over the tram and jam it into the magazine. Jack Butler doesn't run the NRO online that way, where he's the online editor. What do you think? Did they consciously decide, no China, no Hirsch Goldberg pollen, we're not going to do that stuff?
Yeah, I think they consciously decided what they were going to ask, what they were not going to ask. And I think it had to be a decision to fact check or not fact check, right? That was a big
Yes.
debate prior to the CNN debate. There was a big debate after the CNN debate. All of us who wanted a fair debate were delighted with it, but the left was absolutely outraged by it and made a huge deal of it and made it as though CNN had committed this fundamental offense against journalism by having neutral moderators. So I think they decided to fact check. I kind of doubt they sat there as Andy. I think the Obama holder analogy is a really good one. That they sat there and said, now only fact check Trump. That's where the blue bubble comes in, where they only think Trump is untruthful and Kamala's fine. So they only fact check one candidate. If you're planning it, you would have been more careful about covering your tracks, at least fact checking her once. They didn't even do that.
Now, the lawfare has become obvious, and the two counts in Atlanta dismissed yesterday, as Trump predicted he would win every case eventually. He's not going to win if he loses one, he's going to lose the obstruction case in Florida. And it's Jack Smith's bad that he didn't isolate. Democrats should be mad at him. I'm not sure that it's Trump. I haven't seen his defense yet, so I can't say he's going to lose, but that's the strongest case against him. Has the media gone as far as lawfare? In other words, lawfare is a term of art now. We know what it means. It's the weaponization of the Justice Department, both state and federal. Andy McCarthy, has the media gone as far as the justice system has to prosecute and persecute its enemies within the blue, as perceived by the blue bubble?
I think so. I used to talk about when I would write about this kind of stuff, I would talk about the Democratic Party and their media allies. And over the last number of years, I've instead referred to it as the media Democrat complex, because I actually think the media is the senior partner here. And progressive politicians come and go, but the media is eternal. And I do think that they have more of a thumb on the scale today than I think they're more audacious now than they ever have been, which is saying something. But I think they believe they're having their moment, and there are a lot of days I wonder whether they're not right about that.
All my podcasts roll together, so I don't know if you guys brought up George H.W. Bush with Dan Rather, which is when the pushback began, or whether that was on Comfortably Smug or on Commentary. I can't remember where I heard it, but I said, yeah, that's where the pushback came. Rich, has media fair become the equivalent of lawfare now, at least among what I call Manhattan Beltway media elites, legacy media?
Yeah, it's blatant, and it gets worse all the time, which is so depressing, Hugh, because we spent, probably a large percentage of our careers complaining about media bias. We have whole organizations devoted to exposing media bias, and they've done very good jobs at it. And we have media outlets that counter report fake narratives the media comes up with very effectively. But the media still gets worse, and this may be the worst, most biased debate moderation we've ever seen. And so it's had no effect on them. Some of them, they're conscious partisans. A lot of them, they're unconscious partisans. But it doesn't matter. It adds up to this edifice that is a huge thumb on the scale. And if Trump loses, will clearly be part of the reason he's defeated if he is.
We have one more segment, but very quickly, we have 1 minute to the break, and then one segment after the break. Exit question on us, like the old McLaughlin group. Can the media be saved? Rich Lowry, can the media be saved?
No, it's fundamentally corrupt, and we need to do more to develop our own institutions devoted to reporting.
Andrew McCarthy, can the media be saved?
I don't know that it matters, but I think we exaggerate how much it matters because let's remember, Republicans do get elected. Donald Trump did get elected. The media is about as popular as Congress is. So, yes, they're in the tank for one side, but that has its tail effect as well.
There was a Chinese spy in the New York governor's office, both for Hochul and Cuomo. A spy. And how much damage can a spy do? Well, they can take thumb drives and put air-gapped computers and put malware in, or they can just do soft influencing. Rich Lowry, are you following the story? How much damage could she have done?
It was quite bad. She clearly succeeded in tilting how the government of New York handled China, handled Taiwan in Beijing's favor. And to Hugh, it seems to me, there's been a big focus on Russia and Russia's influence operations, but to the extent we know about them in 16 and now, Russia's kind of spent a lot of money on things that just don't matter. Some internet memes on Facebook that no one watched. In 16, this latest Tenet Media thing. The indictment adds up how many views these videos got collectively to make it sound like it's a massive thing. But if you average it out over the videos that were created, it was very small. Whereas China has carried out the most successful espionage operation ever against the United States. They've stolen all of our industrial secrets. And when people are exposed, it's like this. That was really worth China's money. They got a lot of bang for their buck. So this is something we need to take extremely seriously.
And Andrew, when you were prosecuting people in the Southern District, I was at the DOJ doing FISA warrants for the AG. And what these people do, no one really has any idea. They can watch the Americans get sort of a glimpse. It wasn't wet work. There wasn't any of that stuff going on. How much damage could she have done, Andy?
A great deal, but what I worry about is that it's the tip of the iceberg. This is the one we see. We have, compared to the Cold War, and I think Neil Ferguson makes this point brilliantly all the time, we have a very integrated economy with China. We have relations with China that don't even compare to what went on in the Cold War, where there was very little economic integration between the United States and the Soviet Union, and not a lot of foreign exchange. So they're pervasively in not only, you think about the federal government, but the state government, as we're seeing, but also in corporate America, on the campus, in all of the institutions of opinion. And I know we want to put Biden in the rearview mirror, but the House investigation shows that in two different schemes, communist Chinese regime paid the Bidens just between 2014 and 2019, $8 million. Do we think that they were doing that for nothing?
That's why Hunter ended it. Yeah, that's why Mark Scarsy had him read the indictment, because he's pleading guilty to all that money. And now I hope there's a FARA case coming. Andrew and Rich, you've been very generous with your time. I'm going to keep plugging away at getting people to listen to the editors and the McCarthy Report, as well as commentary and other podcasts as an alternative to being informed. But please come back for my DMV special. Because, Rich, you almost got thrown out of a DMV, and Andy, you had come from the DMV, and I have cried in a DMV. And so if the DMV is representative of the government, I think we should do the DMV special. So please come back in the future, and we'll do an entire hour on DMVs. Thank you, friend.
Thanks, guys.
Sarah C. Bedford of the Washington Examiner got up early for me today. Good morning, Sarah. Thank you for doing this. But we really need an update on this CR. You cover the House. What is going on here? We got about 5 minutes. Just take the floor and tell us what's going on.
Well, it's been a bit of a mess this week on something that on paper should have been a pretty easy messaging win for Republicans. House Speaker Mike Johnson wanted to attach a measure called the SAVE Act to a 6-month stopgap spending bill that would last through March. And the SAVE Act would just strengthen protections against illegal immigrants voting in elections, which is a growing concern right now. That bill had passed the House as a standalone before, with even 5 Democrats joining it. So it seemed like a no-brainer. But you have defense hawks, who are the most public voices of opposition here, who are coming out and saying, we don't want to fund the Pentagon at a sort of flat rate for 6 months. They want these defense hawks on the Republican side kind of agree with Democrats that there should be just a 3-month continuing resolution that expires in December. So you have some discomfort with both the SAVE Act portion of the CR and the length of time that Johnson proposed. So on Wednesday, as the House was getting ready to go ahead and vote on this, Johnson, realizing the votes just weren't there, pulled the measure. And I think right now, a lot of the anxiety is over the fact there doesn't seem to be a compelling plan B now that CR has been pulled.
Now, I've read that there doesn't seem to be a plan B. Is that just Mike Johnson being good at this again? Because he turned out to be a very effective speaker. And do you think he's just knitting together the coalition?
Well, I think a private plan B that was sort of floating around was potentially breaking off the SAVE Act piece from the CR and still keeping that 6-month timeline. So in other words, using the SAVE Act as leverage to extend the CR into March. And what that would do is prevent this Congress, which has this very thinly divided House and this Democratic Senate, from locking in a potential Trump presidency to a year of funding for things that Trump doesn't support, like more funding for Ukraine and a bigger federal budget. So that's what Republicans were trying to avoid with a 6-month CR, which would give the new Congress and very likely a Republican-controlled Senate the opportunity to do a longer-term funding bill. So that was a sort of plan B that had been floating around the House. I'm not sure that Johnson anticipated the level of opposition from those centrist defense hawk Republicans in his conference, like Mike Rogers, who are saying that they don't support the 6-month timeline, regardless of what happens with the SAVE Act.
Well, I'm with Rogers and Ken Calvert. People don't know what CRs do to the Pentagon. They're terrible, aren't they, Sarah? They're just awful on the Pentagon.
They can be. That's certainly the defense hawks argument that the Pentagon can't function if you just hold its funding flat for that period of time. They just want to get to the omnibus spending bill as quickly as possible. That would be in December under the timeline that Schumer and also these centrist Republicans want. But again, that's kicking the can to after the election, which could be a very contentious time, and locking in a Trump presidency to funding that he doesn't want. So there are other Republicans who are really serious about getting a 6-month CR.
I'm going to talk with Dan Sullivan. The Senate will not pass this. The hawks in the Senate and the hawks, I call them just realists. They're not going to pass this. It's bad for the country's defense. So, Sarah, possible government shutdown, when does it start?
Well, the government shutdown would start in October 1st, but I don't think that a government shutdown is on the horizon. Problem for Johnson is it'll look like a massive cave if he just goes ahead with a clean 3-month CR without the SAVE Act after making so much noise about this being a really important messaging bill for Republicans. But again, he has these also who they've been less vocal in this fight, but certainly a factor. The conservatives who, someone used the term with me, McCarthy derangement syndrome this week. There are a handful of conservatives who are going to try to take essentially any deal that Johnson strikes with Democrats, but a 3-month CR without the SAVE Act would be a tough pill to swallow for those conservatives.
I want to begin with an apolitical guy. Admiral Mike Manozier returns. The admiral is known as nasty to his colleagues and friends in the Navy, but I call you Admiral. You've got a Lead to Win series out. People will remember you were here before when Lead to Win debuted. Now you have a Lead from the Heart series. I got my eyes on it, and I want people to know about it. This is apolitical. First, welcome back. Second, let's plug away. Tell people about the book and the series.
Well, hi, Hugh. It's so wonderful to be back here. Essentially, sort of launched on your show. Your show was right close to launching that book right over my right shoulder there. And since then, we've actually put a newsletter on the web that people can go get. We've published a Maxims book, which takes the 10 good rules from the back of the Lead to Win book, and then also a study guide. And if somebody wants to either learn more or do activities deeper into learning how to lead from your heart and without a title, they can have all those things. So the series is actually all three of those with a significant discount. And that bundle's available on Amazon. There's a link on the website, www.mikemanazer.com. And we're in the last hours, actually, of that promotion, just the timing of our show. By the way, not a sales pitch. Get yours now. It's about to end, but the series is still available, even if it's not discounted. So I'm very proud
Admiral
of
Manazer,
that.
I do sell pitches because that's what I know how to do. I know how to sell and to talk at length, sometimes about nothing at great length, but I know how to sell books. Lead to Win had a great impact on me. I've told many stories from it, including the motorcycle story, which I'm not going to go into right now. But you got a day job, right? You're very, very actively employed. Why are you doing this? You don't have to do this. I'm very curious. I want people to go. First of all, let's repeat the website where they can go get the offer because it's only today. What's the website?
www.mikemanazer.com, and all no spaces.
No space. And it's MANAZIR, Manazer.com, MikeManazer.com.
Yes, sir.
Why are you doing this whole business? I mean, it's not, you don't need the money, you're working. You're obviously passionate about it. Why?
Gives me joy. When I learned how to lead in the United States Navy over 36 years, I've given great opportunities. Actually, I'm reflecting this week. This week, 23 years ago, I was an executive officer at USS Carl Vinson, and we were rounding the southern tip of India. And one of the biggest lessons I learned as the XO was how to delegate so I could lead 3,500 sailors through 18 department heads. That was just one lesson in how I learned how to lead. And I thought as I was growing up in the Navy, especially with more senior jobs, the captain of a carrier, the admiral, the commanding officer of a squadron. But then I reflected back down into where before I was the skipper, and I thought, hey, I learned a lot of lessons. And I want to pay that forward as the vernacular goes. I want to teach the people behind me. And so when I was strike group commander on the Eisenhower Strike Group, Dwight D. Eisenhower Strike Group 2012, 2013, I would gather the upcoming leaders, the ex-executive officers, the seconds in command, the skippers, the people who were following me, and I would say, look, this is what happened to me. These are the lessons I learned. And the biggest impactful lessons, Hugh, were the ones where I failed. There's so much failure through that book. Oh my gosh. I mean, all kinds of stuff, that I learned. And so I want to pass that on. The other thing too is I want to emphasize to people you can lead with joy and empathy from your heart, and you can amp up even the hardest tasks. And I want to show people you can do that because that's what happened to me. I just love leading with people. And I found the most effective way to do that is a connection from your heart and not with a title. And I held a lot of titles. I was a skipper and a captain and an admiral and, all those things. And I don't think it's effective to lead with a title. So I just find that I want to emphasize to people, and I want to attract 1 million leaders to lead from our heart. Because if we all do that, if we collectively lead, you form a higher performing team, and you have a better, more cohesive team rather than the boss saying, "Hey, I told you how to do that." Last point.
Yep.
When you have your title, people know you're the boss. They know you're the boss. That's good. Put that aside. Now lead as a good human being.
Now, Admiral, I've had a lot of admirals on. Stav was on this week, and Admiral McCraven's been on. I had a lot of generals on, General Mattis, General McChrystal. I have a lot of military leaders on because they learn how to lead apolitically, right? They're not in the blue-red world. Is it possible to take that model and get it into the blue-red world? Because the blue-red world is where I live, and everyone I know in the military, including my family members in the military, they're not political. They don't want to be political, but I don't know, will the political world listen to leadership lessons from the military world? Because boy, we'd be better off if they did.
Well, absolutely, Hugh. You can translate this to any world. And whether you're red or blue, whatever your cause is, whatever you're trying to do, the way you motivate people, the way you influence people is by being somebody they want to be around. You want to be a good human. You want to have good character. You want to have integrity. People want to follow you, wherever that course is. I think right now that people are worried about the direction of our country writ large, and so they're looking for leadership. We don't have to go political in the military because we serve the commander in chief, raise our hand to serve an ideal, which is the Constitution of the United States. It's not that we don't want to be there. And we don't shy away from it. It's that we serve whoever the leadership of the country goes to. So absolutely, I think people are people. There are two things that I've learned about people: red, blue, foreigners, US, wherever they are. They want to feel valued and they want to feel part of something bigger than themselves. If you feel valued as a human being and you get to be part of something bigger than yourself, you're going to feel good about life. And so we want leaders to help people feel good about their lives.
What is your ratio of compliments to critiques? Because I've always heard the 7-to-1 rule. Give 7 words of praise for every word of criticism if you want the criticism to work. What do you think?
That's a good one. Start with good. Start with continue to do this. Middle is consider this. The last one is stress to the person that you value them and what they bring to your fight. There's a funny thing. Hey, thanks for coming to work today. And they go, look, of course I'm supposed to. And he goes, no, actually not. Thank you for being here because I could not do my job. I could not run my company. I could not make this team work. I could not get that product done if you didn't come to work. So start with the good. Do it. So I use the model of continue, good feedback. Consider, you might change something a little bit. And then the last thing is you go, hey, you rock. Thanks so much. Because a lot of people don't get that. Hey, how am I doing subjectively? And again, way down deep below, Hugh, we want to kind of be liked. So you want the boss to go, hey, man, you're cool. I like being around you. And so that's what I would use as a model. And I tend to extend trust a little farther. Some people say they wait to see if you can be trusted or somebody can be trusted. I actually extend trust. We might have talked about it in your first radio show. Learn how to. The Speed of Trust by Stephen M. R.
Right.
Covey, which is back behind me somewhere. Talks about trust. That's a great book about how to lead a team. Extend trust. They feel trusted. They feel empowered, and they feel like they're part of your team.
Well, Lead to Win is a great place to start. I mean, CEOs, executives, operating officers, and people who want to end up being that can get Lead to Win. Leading from the Heart, the workbook. Would you walk me through the workbook one more time? What does that do? I have not seen that. I've got Lead to Win on my shelf in California. I do not have the workbook. What does the workbook do?
So the Maxims book is this one, and it takes the 10 rules at the back of Lead to Win. And what I put back there was after all the discussions and the 33 stories and the leadership lessons, I distilled it into 10 rules that helped me lead. And what we did was we thought, hey, what do those 10 rules mean? And so we pulled them out and wrote a book about them separately. And it's sort of in the model of Lead to Win, where there's the maxim, then there's a story about it, then there's some reflections and resources. So it's a companion book. It's thinner and it goes right into, hey, these are 10 rules that work. And, my 10 rules, there's a list on the social media, how to be a good leader, how, what to avoid, all that kind of stuff. Are there anything special about mine? Heck no. It's what I just used to be able to lead. And then what we built on top of that as a third product for anybody who's looking for this. So you've got the Lead to Win book, got the Maxims book where we go deeper. And then the workbook takes the maxims in that book, and it has activities, calibrating questions, things to consider. And so it's actually a teaching manual. Though that workbook is a teaching manual based right on the 10 maxims that are explained in here and listed in the Lead to Win book. So it's a companion series.
And the website one more time, Admiral?
www.mikemanazer.com. You can sign up for a weekly newsletter on that website. You can go to a blog. It's awesome.
MikeManazer.com, MikeManazer.com, and it's MANAZIR.com. Poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Joe.
Hello, you. There's so much that I could write about this week, but sometimes you have to take the long view, okay? Have you ever had a project that you've seen with such precision that no matter how you pitch it, no one else can see the vision? Have you found a new investment that you're certain will advance, but you need a canny partner and none will take the chance. Remember all those moments, the way that they incensed you when all the facts are for you, but the world's against you. When you see two warring factions and you try to work a truce, but neither one will listen and you figure what's the use. When you dash out of the lab and cry, Eureka, a solution, but you can't reach the deciders at your giant institution. Remember your invention, how fate never recompensed you when all the facts are for you, but the world's against you. Well, that's the way I'm feeling. The facts are on our side. Their records of disasters is impossible to hide. There's no savings in the bank and there's no bacon in the larder. The president's not working when he should be working harder. So I say this to the doubters as I say this to myself. A vision is no vision if it's sitting on the shelf. Let your confidence stay steady. Let your reasoning be sound. If the facts are really with you, then the world will come around. That's Hang In There by Tarzana Joe.
Gosh, I hope you're right, Joe. I think you're right. Can we look forward to a poem about eating dogs next week?
Not at all. But I might write a poem about us no stripers. I mean, if they feel that way about one stripers, how do they feel about us no stripers?
Oh, Kirby's in big trouble. You listened to yesterday's show, obviously, and Admiral Kirby is in big, big trouble. But you're not, Joe. You're making everybody happy every Friday, and I hope you're busy. Are you busy at tarzanajoe@reagan.com? Those commissions coming in?
Wonderfully busy. Wonderfully busy. Thank you.
You know, Joe asked, often asked, when am I going to retire? And I said, the earliest is at the end of the 2028 cycle, God willing. And as Stephen Maturin says in the Aubrey Maturin novel, God, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, and Patrick be with me. You going to keep writing poems till you're called to your reward?
Well, often as a retired person from my other life, people say, what do you do to fill the day, Joe? And, so this is what I do to fill the day, you.
How many poems can you do in a day? I'm just curious. How many can you turn out?
When pressed, I've done 3 a day, but I like to do 1 a day.
Yeah, I just think clearing your head. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com for all your poetry needs, and you would not believe how often you need poetry if you think about it. Weddings, anniversaries, farewell dinners, friendly dinners. You just want to surprise someone. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com.
Recently, a surprise I love you poem, which is one of the best.
Oh, terrific. TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com for all your poetry needs. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Hugh. Great to be back on the show. I'm doing great.
I almost fell out of my chair when Vice President Harris said to former President Trump, this is the first time in, 20 years that we don't have any Americans in a combat theater.
Oh, my
What
gosh.
did you think?
Oh, my gosh. Not only fell out of my chair, but it goes to one of the huge issues that wasn't asked about. But first, let me get directly to that question. Tell that to some of the Hugh Hewitt family in the Navy. Tell that to the U.S. sailors and Marines on Navy ships in the Red Sea who are taking...
Yeah, I've got family on the Lincoln.
Yeah, there you go. Who are taking incoming missiles from the Houthis on a daily basis. And the Biden-Harris administration is so weak. They are so weak on foreign policy and deterrence, particularly on Iran, that the Houthis, a ragtag group of terrorists, continue to shut down the entire Red Sea, shoot at Navy ships. And by the way, Hugh, we've talked about it, and I've been raising this like crazy in hearings and meetings with the senior Biden administration officials and uniformed military. The Iranian spy ships were giving the Houthis targeting information on our Navy ships. And I've asked them all, how come those Iranian spy ships are not at the bottom of the sea? Like Operation Praying Mantis during the Reagan
1988.
administration,
Yep.
where we said, hey, quit mining Persian Gulf, Iran, or we're going to take action. They didn't listen to us. We sunk 6 Iranian ships in 2 weeks, blew up some of their oil platforms, and guess what? They quit mining the Gulf. We haven't done any of that. And of course, our Navy and Marines are in combat taking missiles on a daily basis because of the weakness and appeasement of this administration towards Iran.
You served as a colleague of Senator Harris for 4 years when she was senator from California, and she, of course, presided over the Senate and cast the deciding vote for all the spending that started the inflation. What do you think of her candidacy?
Well, look, let me just go back to the issue that we just talked about. I'm sure you saw it. Hopefully your listeners read it. But our platform that we put out prior to the Milwaukee Convention was all about peace through strength. As a matter of fact, you look at our 2024 platform in the Reagan 1984 platform on that topic, they look very, very similar. Peace through strength. What do the Democrats do whenever they get into power? They cut defense spending. That's Carter, that's Clinton, that's Obama, and that is definitely Biden. Every budget he's put forward was cutting military. His budget this year shrinks the Army, shrinks the Navy, shrinks the Marine Corps. Hugh, you and I have talked about it. It's a very dangerous world. But here's the thing. If you think Biden's bad on defense, think about Kamala Harris. This is a quote from Kamala Harris. When she was a candidate, she said, quote, "I unequivocally agree with the goal of continuing to reduce the defense budget." When she was a senator, she joined Bernie Sanders and Chuck Schumer on an across-the-board cut for our Department of Defense of at least 10%. These guys don't understand military strength. There's a giant contrast between Democrats and Republicans. When President Trump came into office, what did he do? He rebuilt our military just the way Reagan did, just the way, heck, every Republican president has done. She is going to be a disaster. Think about her sitting down with Xi Jinping and Putin. Honest to God, Hugh, it's the one thing that scares the living daylights out of me.
Senator, you are a Marine, so I want to be very careful how I state this. The military has a recruitment crisis. Marines made their goal. They reduced the goal because the Marine Corps has been shrunk by Biden, but they made their goal. There are enough young men and women who want to be Marines. They made their goal. The other branches did not, and the Army's the worst. How bad will it get under a President Harris versus a President Trump?
I think it'll be bad. And look, we've talked about it. I'm a retired Marine colonel. Infantry, recon was my MOS. Deployed all over the world. I don't consider myself a combat vet like, others who do, but I have been in the middle of this recruiting issue. And here's, again, the reason, and you're asking a really, really important question. It's the way in which the Biden-Harris civilian leaders, when they came into the military, what they focus on. The first day of the Biden administration, when they came into office, the first order that they put out dealing with our military was make sure that active duty military members could get transgender surgeries. Okay? That was their priority. I mean, that is a fact. That's not focused on lethality. That's not focused on readiness. It's focused on social issues. And so what's happened with regard to recruiting, you've probably seen this Emma ad that the U.S. Army put out. It'll just turn your stomach. They don't focus on why young men and women want to join the military, which is to protect their nation, which is to deploy, which is to be challenged at the highest level. And they focus on other issues that have nothing to do with the whole issue of lethality, readiness, and being ready to go defend your country. And that is the nub of the crisis in terms of recruiting. And they got to get back to, and look, you're right, the Marines have shrunk, but the Marines have met their recruiting goals year after year. Why? I think it's because they stay consistent. They challenge people. You want to join us, one of the few, the proud, and you're going to deploy. This is not going to be easy. And that's why people want to join the military. I'm sure you've heard it from your sons and son-in-laws and others. So I worry, again, Biden-Harris, The recruiting crisis will continue. And by the way, that is a sleeper issue. We have a
Oh, it was.
military.
I regret one thing about the last. I've done 5 debates, and in the November debate, I got 3 questions, and then we ran out of time. My 4th question was about recruitment. My other 3 questions were about China. There were no questions on China in the debate Tuesday night. I about fell off my chair. Then I realized Disney's got theme parks in China. I don't know if it was spoken. I don't know if it was ordered. But can you believe there was not one question about China in the only presidential debate we're going to have between Harris and Trump?
No, and your op-ed recently on this topic was spot on. Do I think that was purposeful with regard to ABC bias? Maybe. Heck, the NBA is scared about mentioning China. So
Yep.
much of corporate America is scared about mentioning China. That was just a giant issue sitting right there, and nobody talked about it, and they wouldn't ask the question. So, you did your op-ed. I thought was really outstanding, in part because you talk about something that a lot of us don't think about. When you're a moderator, how much prep time you have to do, right, before a debate. And
I'll close this way, Senator. I want you to get the last word. They're very scripted. 12 rehearsals for the November debate, hours of meetings, prep time. I pick my questions, but they're vetted. We practice. We know where we're going. We have a guy in our ear telling us things. We know there's a commercial break. That was scripted. I think ABC, Disney went in the tank for Harris, but I also think everyone is realizing that, and opinion is turning around, and is going to be for Trump. I think Trump's going to win. What do you think, and why?
Well, I think he's going to win because during the debate and during all his public appearances, he focuses on what people care about. And what is that? It's the border, it's the economy, and it's inflation. And that is what's on the minds of working families in America. And those are the people that need to break for President Trump, the undecided voters. Those are the key issues. Those are the key issues he focused on during the debate. And by the way, Hugh, those are the issues that Kamala Harris didn't have an answer to. And I thought President Trump's wrap-up when he said, wait a minute, you had 3.5 years to fix this stuff. What were you doing? She had no answer. So
No
he
answer at
sticks
all.
with that and goes to peace through strength. The Democrats want to cut defense spending, gut our readiness. They do it every single time. She's on record for doing it. So is Biden. And Trump's on record for rebuilding America's military strength and our military men and women. That's the winning message. So to me, I agree with you.
Senator John Thune is the Senate GOP whip from South Dakota. He is a friend of the program. I've known him for years. And welcome, Senator. I'm going to brag on you a bit, but I want to say welcome first. It's always good to talk to you.
Yeah, it's always good to be with you. Thank you.
I want to brag on you a bit because I asked your team. I said, tell me where he's been. Don't tell me what he wants to talk about. Tell me where he's been. He has been in Nevada, Montana, Maryland, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin, Minnesota, which is good because Eric Hovde gets help when you go to Minnesota, PA with Dave McCormick, Utah, Nevada, Kramer in South Dakota. Senator Kramer's going to win, but you were there for him. You and Vance have been in Nebraska for Ricketts, and he's going to win. Eric Hovde got you back. You've done events for Rogers and Domenici and Hogan. You're exhausted, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, look, Hugh, this is a make or break moment. This is our time to just leave it all on the field, and so everybody's doing everything they can to help the team and try and make as many of these races around the country get across the finish line as possible. So yeah, we're all at it.
Well, $26 million helped raise in this cycle at these events. Thank you. I'm a Republican. People know that. Let's go through the map. We're going to win, we being Republicans. And I'm an open partisan. I don't hide it. West Virginia, Jim Justice is going to be Senator Justice. I think she's going to win, too. So I want to focus on the 4 closest, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Hogan. And then we'll get to Eric Hovde, who's closing in Wisconsin, Brown in Nevada, Kerry Lake in Arizona is closing. Nella Domenici is a surprise. And maybe Hung Kao has a shot. So let's start not with West Virginia and Montana, but Dave McCormick and Bernie Moreno, because I got stations all over Pennsylvania and Ohio. How are they doing, Senator?
Yes, you do. Well, they're doing great and they're working hard. I mean, if there is any premium for just flat out working your opponents, those 2 candidates are doing it. And I spent 2 days on the bus with Dave McCormick in Pennsylvania. He and his wife Dina are hitting the state hard, have a great message, and same thing in Ohio. I mean, Bernie Moreno is out there every single day from dawn to dusk, just pounding away. And I think now, Hugh, that their television campaign's amping up, and the weight of the television, they've been getting hammered on TV for, since the beginning of the summer, because these Democrats have had such a financial advantage, but that's now starting to close, and these races are going to tighten. And I feel really good about where we're at. We have great candidates, a really good map, and some really weak incumbents. And I think
I don't want to critique anyone's team, but the very best team is the McCormick team. Their ads are amazing. They just need money to put them up.
They do, and it takes a lot of money in Pennsylvania, which is why if anybody's out there and wants to make a difference in this election, getting money to some of these key races is huge. And you're right. He's got great creative content. They are now starting to really draw contrast, and that race is tightening. And you can see the Casey message changing in response to that, which is a good indication that they're hitting home in the McCormick campaign.
Now, I had Mike Rogers on yesterday. Michigan can be won by President Trump, and I think Mike Rogers can win with a good lead. I mean, I think he can win by 2 or 3 points. How do you feel about Michigan and Mike Rogers? Because he's a serious man for a serious time.
Former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, former intelligence officer, military guy, really experienced at a time when we need that on the world stage, somebody with his background experience. And just a high quality human being. And I think, again, he and his wife Christy, and I've been with them in Michigan, and we're heading back there, is running a great campaign, Hugh. And I agree with you. I think the dynamics in Michigan right now, you've got the what's happening with Israel and Hamas, which is a huge population in Michigan. I think it's going to be really hard for Harris and Democrats to win them back. You got the union vote because of the EV mandate. You got a big shift in some of these, populated centers, urban centers, where African-American men are starting to break for Republicans. I think there's a lot of really good dynamics at work there, and Mike's working it hard. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's one of those races that it's going to tighten, and Trump performs well there. I think we have a really good chance of winning Michigan.
Now, one of my favorite people, Larry Hogan, despite the fact he's a Ravens fan, I think he's going to win, which is going to be amazing because Maryland is a deep blue state, but Larry is a very beloved governor. What do you think? You've done an event for him.
I've done 3 events with him now, and we've got another one coming up. And I think in my view at least, he's got to run a long ways ahead of the top of the ticket, but he's the guy that can do it, and he's got a proven record as a governor. And I think what people are looking for now in Washington is competence, and I think Larry Hogan as a governor screams competence. He got things done. He did hard stuff. He cut spending, cut taxes in a Democrat state. And I think when people, Democrats and independents in Maryland, think of Larry Hogan, they think of a guy who gets things done. And I think that's what, I think it's going to really, really help him. I think he's going to run a long ways ahead of the top of the ticket.
I'm going to come back with Senator Thune after this break and go through the other races because I am pretty confident about Eric Hovde and Kerry Lake, but I don't know about Sam Brown. Can he do it? Can Nella Domenici upset the world? And can Hung Kao pull a 1980 and come out of nowhere and beat an incumbent with all sorts of fun? Okay, Senator, Eric Hovde, Sam Brown, Kerry Lake, Nella Domenici, Hung Kao. How do you rate these? How do you feel about them?
Well, again, I think they're all candidates that can get across the finish line that fit their states really well. And, I'm in Wisconsin today, this morning, doing some stuff with Eric Hovde. We did a fundraiser for him last night in Madison. And as you know, Wisconsin, it's Madison, Milwaukee, and then the rest of the state. And if he can overperform in these 2 counties, in Madison and in Milwaukee, I think the rest of Wisconsin brings him home. And again, you've got a really high-quality candidate, 4th-generation Wisconsinite, a successful entrepreneur, businessman, philanthropist, running against somebody who just doesn't have a record of having really accomplished anything in the Senate. And I think it's a great contrast. He's an incredibly energetic candidate on the trail. Again, working really, really hard, taking his message to the people of Wisconsin. I think that's going to be appreciated down the stretch. So I'm really hopeful about this one. I think too this one is tightened and I think it's going to tighten more. And I think
All
you
right,
get Nevada and Arizona and New Mexico, some great opportunities out there, strong candidates running great races.
Yeah, that's the border states. All right, and some of them aren't on the border like Nevada, but Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico migration. President Trump hit it hard, but that was the most biased debate I've ever seen. And I mean, on an order of magnitude, like the Richter scale. I want to get your thoughts on that debate before I let you go, Senator.
Well, it was loaded deck. I mean, it was 3-on-1, and that was what he was up against. And of course, I think everybody kind of knew that going in. But I think the points that he had to make, and again, the Harris record has got to be exposed. She can try and run from her positions, but she can't run from her record. And if you look at this campaign and what it's about elections are about differences. The contrast couldn't be more great on all the major issues. They've had a wide open southern border. They got over 20% inflation. People vote their pocketbooks. They vote kitchen table issues. They want their family to be safer and more secure. And we've got an open border which has criminals and terrorists and all other types of bad elements coming across, making this country less safe and the economy less stable. And so I just think we've got the arguments on our side. I think President Trump closed it out well the other night. He's got to make her own that record. She's trying to run away from it. She's trying to shift her positions, which is what the Democrats do. But at the end of the day, it's the American people are going to make a decision based upon whether or not they think they're in a better place today than they were 4 years ago, and they're going to reflect favorably on the time when Trump was in office. And I think that's going to make the difference.
Very last question, my edification. You're too young to remember the 1972 gold medal game between the Soviets and the Americans, how the referees, the desk, the scorers, the officials, the IOC, they all ganged up to make sure the U.S. didn't win that game. 3 times they had to play the end until the Soviets won. Did you see that? Did you ever hear about that? Because that's what that debate reminded me of.
Well, and yeah, I remember that. You're right. I'm a little younger than you, not a lot younger than you, but a big hoops fan, and yeah, clearly that was what our team was up against at the time, and that's kind of what our team is up against this time. I mean, you're never going to get a fair shake, and so you just have to factor that in and then go out and win by big enough margins that it doesn't matter.